Hey everybody, it's Innovision, and in today's video, we're going to show you how to dual boot SteamOS and Windows 11 on your SteamOS supported gaming devices. This is a step-by-step guide that leaves no stone unturned. By the end of this video, you'll be living the good life and you'll be having the best of both worlds. I recommend you block off some serious amount of time to pull this off. And I recommend you take some time to familiarize yourself with the steps we cover in this video, especially if this is your first time doing this sort of thing. You're about to unlock the full potential of your gaming device and have the illest upgrade of the century. As we get started, I'd like to note that this process will erase your entire SSD unless you already have SteamOS installed. We're not responsible for any lost data or damage that may happen to your device. This video and the steps within are provided for educational purposes and do not provide any type of warranty. We're going to quickly go over the list of materials you need to get your dual boot up and running. You'll need a SteamOS compatible gaming device. This could be gaming handhelds like the Legion Go, the Legion Go S, the ROG Ally, and even some gaming PCs. You'll need 2 USB storage media. One is going to be needed for creating a SteamOS recovery image. The second is going to be needed for creating a Windows 11 recovery image. One thing I recommend you do with your USB storage media, especially if they're quite similar, and even if they're actually not similar, just so you don't get confused, try labeling them. So I have this one labeled S for SteamOS, and then the other one's just missing the label. So that's how I know this is my Windows one. You'll also need a mouse and keyboard. I like to use this wireless Logitech mouse and keyboard combo because it allows me to use this unifying receiver that's back here on this dock. And that unifying receiver lets both the mouse and keyboard communicate over that one USB port. You'll need a USB Type-C charging dock or USB hub. And so on my desk here, I've got the official Legion Go dock along with this U-Green one. This U-Green one's a universal one. I really like this one. This didn't exist at the time I picked up my Legion Go dock. And in fact, every video I work on, I'm actually using this dock. And some of the features I like about it, it's got the ability to replace the USB Type-C cord that plugs into your device, so you can add a great amount of length. But the most important thing about your dock, it should have enough USB ports to support you having the flash media connected along with a USB mouse and keyboard. And very important here, it should have a wired internet connection. The Windows installer doesn't have all the drivers it needs, and so when you're at the Windows installation step, it's going to be very important that you're connected to a wired internet connection. There are ways to install the Wi-Fi driver during the installation process. I'm not covering it here today. I don't like to use that process. The main advantage too for the wired internet connection, not only will it download everything faster, but it's reducing any margin for error. So there's less things that can go wrong during your setup. And I'm going to provide links to all the items and materials I used in the description of the video, so definitely you'll want to check it out if you don't have these materials already. We have our block diagram of the steps needed to get your dual boot up and running up here on the screen. And the first thing you'll notice is that it's a color-coded diagram. The green blocks correspond to steps that we'll be doing with SteamOS, and the blue blocks correspond to things that we're going to be doing with Windows 11. We're going to quickly just go through the steps just so we can talk about them. So the first step is going to be create a SteamOS recovery media and go ahead and install SteamOS. And that will erase your entire SSD. Once you have SteamOS installed, we're going to go on to step number 2, which is resize your SteamOS home partition. And the home partition is the last partition that's on the disk. Now that we've got our home partition resized, we've essentially freed up space that we're going to use to install Windows 11. And so the next step we're going to go on to is step number 3 here, which is create a Windows 11 recovery media and go ahead and install Windows 11. Now that you've got Windows 11 installed, we're going to go on to step 4, which is download and install the Legion Space app and download and install any of your outstanding Windows updates. Now that you've downloaded and installed Legion Space and you've downloaded your Windows 11 updates, we're going to go on to step 5, which is to reboot your Windows 11. And at this point in time, SteamOS is no longer bootable. So your device is going to automatically boot into Windows 11. And when you log in, it's going to automatically launch the Legion Space app. If for whatever reason the Legion Space app does not launch, go ahead and reboot again. I've ran into this a couple of times, but Legion Space is set up to automatically load once Windows logs in, unless you disable that option, which you can do later. So once you're in Legion space, go ahead and download all your latest drivers. They might already be installed on some systems, like the Legion Go S, for example, didn't have anything to download, but the OG Legion Go did. Now that you've got your latest drivers installed from the Legion Space app, we're on to step 6. We want to fix SteamOS so that we can boot into it again. The thing that we're going to do in step 6 is repair the file system. So the partition table got corrupted by the Windows installer. And so once the partition table has been repaired, we're going to go ahead and reinstall our EFI bootloader for SteamOS, and this will make it so you can boot into SteamOS again. Now that we can boot into both Windows 11 and SteamOS, we're going to go on to step number 7, which are some quality of life improvements, like installing a top-level EFI bootloader that lets you pick between which operating system you want to boot. Technically, you don't need to do this step. You can just go into the BIOS and switch the boot order if you wanted. But for me, I like to just be greeted with a screen where I can pick which one I want to boot into. And then there's another step that I'll cover in number 7, which is hiding your EFI partitions in Windows. You don't want to see them. You don't want Windows to automatically use them for anything because it could damage your system's ability to boot. Now that you've finished step number 7, the obligatory next step is to hit the like button on the video and subscribe. Show your love. This video was a lot of work. I can do this kind of stuff in my sleep, but to make a video out of it and in a format that people can follow along at home, this takes a long time, and it was a labor of love. So show that love back. Subscribe, tell your friends and family to subscribe, stick around because we're just getting started. So the first step to getting your dual boot set up, if you don't have it already installed, you're going to want to create a SteamOS recovery media and go ahead and install SteamOS. We have a few videos on the channel showing you how to do this. I recommend starting with the video called SteamOS Stable 3.7.8 is here, and I'll have a link in the description of the video. And if for whatever reason you don't have your SteamOS recovery media still, but you have SteamOS installed, just go to that video. It'll show you how to create a SteamOS recovery media. And so once you've got SteamOS installed, you can go through and set up everything you want, like your Simple Decky TDP, your Legion Go remapper, or your Key Hue Sync if you're on the Legion Go S, or whatever plugins you might be needing on the ROG Ally Devices, for example. Once your SteamOS is already set up and configured the way you want, don't worry, we're not going to lose any information from that. So you can go ahead and shut down. So we've got SteamOS installed, it's properly configured. We're ready to take on step number 2, which is resizing SteamOS home partition. And in order to do this, we're going to need to use our SteamOS recovery media to boot into recovery mode, because you cannot resize disks while your operating system is live. You need to use recovery media to be your live OS. Alright, so first things first, this guide makes only one single assumption, and that assumption is you already have a device that's running SteamOS. Whether it's a Legion Go, a Legion Go S, or one of the ROG Ally devices, your device is already running SteamOS. And if you don't have SteamOS already installed, we have several guides on our channel that can help you do this. Once you have a device that's running SteamOS, we also have coming into our device a USB Type-C cable that's connected to a hub, and so we're charging our device, but also hooked up to my hub is my SteamOS recovery media and a mouse and keyboard. You technically don't need the mouse and keyboard, you can get around without it, but it just makes life simpler. I have a device with SteamOS already installed. I have my SteamOS recovery media already connected to my dock, and the first thing we're going to want to do is power down our device. So make sure it gets powered down completely, and so I'm going to do that now. For Legion Go devices, you're going to push volume plus and then hit the power button while leaving your finger on volume plus. Alright, and so now we're greeted with this BIOS options menu. So we're going to go into BIOS setup, and we want to boot off of our Steam recovery media, which in my case is this EFI USB device. So I'm going to push it up to the top of the menu, and then I'm going to hit exit and then save and exit right here. And we'll start booting into SteamOS off of the recovery media. And this is important because what we're going to do next, we're going to resize our home partition. So when SteamOS sets itself up, the very last partition on your NVMe SSD is your home partition, and that's the largest partition. And that's where all your downloaded games and game related content goes. It's also your user data. I'll also have things related to your specific Steam account in that partition. I have a 4 terabyte NVMe SSD installed on my Legion Go here, and I'm using a 2242 to 2280 NVMe SSD adapter. I recommend having at least a 2 terabyte SSD, but any size SSD will work for this. It's just a personal preference. And so what I'd like to do in this video, I'm going to try to allocate around a terabyte for Windows and leave the rest for SteamOS. And this is very nice because now I can dual boot between the two. Alright, so we're in our SteamOS recovery environment. We're not going to select any of these options here. We want to go down here to the Start menu and then go to System, and we're looking for this KDE Partition Manager. Click on that. We're not going to be asked for a password because we're in the recovery environment, and it shows, this will show all the, it's going to be slow for a second. So keep in mind this is a live Linux distro and it's running off of the USB, and so it can be slow. If you see that it's being slow and unresponsive, just wait. Don't panic. Don't do anything irrational. Just wait. You can see here our last partition on our NVMe SSD is this home directory. And just to confirm here, you see here I have my crucial NVMe SSD and it's showing 3.64 terabytes. That's because you don't actually have all the usable space, but this is a 4 terabyte disk. This last partition here, the biggest one, is the one we want to resize. We're going to right click on it and go to Resize Partition. Before I do that, I just can't stress enough that make sure you're resizing the home partition. If you mess with any of these other partitions, you're going to break your SteamOS installation. We're going to right click, go to Resize and Move. And so I want to add after. And so when I add the space after this partition, it's going to take space from the partition itself. The units that we're using are mebibytes, not megabytes. And so I recommend going to Google and type, however much space you want in terabytes and convert it into mebibytes. And so in our example, we're converting 1.25 terabytes into mebibytes. The next step that we're going to do is super critical here. Once you've picked this, you're going to want to click Apply and then click Apply Pending Operations. It's going to rewrite the partition table and free up that space. So we're going to click OK. Alright, so one thing I'm going to try is make a new partition. I'm going to give it, let's see, is NTFS here? So I'm going to set it to NTFS for this 1.2 terabyte disk. Maybe SteamOS won't try to reclaim it. I'm not going to test it right now, but I think if you were to go ahead and allocate this space, SteamOS won't try to automatically use it because now it's in use. But if you leave it as free space, SteamOS will definitely try to relinquish that space once you boot into SteamOS. Alright, it finished writing the new partition table, and we've allocated that 1.2 terabyte of space to an NTFS partition. And so we can go ahead and exit this. That step that I just did isn't necessary if you boot straight into Windows, but I think by allocating this space ahead of time, it'll make it so SteamOS can't try to reclaim that space the next time you boot. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually just shut down. So we need to go down here, click shut down, and shut down. And we're going to wait for it to completely power down. At the tail end of resizing our home partition, you know, I've actually tried this a couple times where I've resized it and then rebooted into SteamOS. SteamOS will automatically reclaim that space that's unused. So it's very important at the end, once you resize it, to go ahead and allocate that space with a new file system. And we show you that in the clip, but I just wanted to point out that it does block SteamOS from reclaiming that space if you go ahead and use it. So we've resized our home partition. We're ready to go to step number 3, which is creating a Windows 11 recovery media, booting off of it, and installing Windows 11. All right. So in order to create our Windows 11 recovery media, we're just going to type in our search here, Windows 11 Media Creation Tool. And we're going to take this link, download Windows 11. So we don't want the installation assistant. We want the Windows 11 installation media. So we'll click download now. And once you've downloaded it, you're just going to go ahead and click on it to open it. So we're going to say yes here. And I'm going to go ahead and plug in my USB 3 drive. Plug in my USB. So this is actually a recovery media I already created, but I'm just going to override it here just to show everyone how to do it. So we've launched the application. We're just going to go down here to accept. All right, and uncheck the box that says use recommended options for this PC. And so we're just going to use Windows 11 Home. We're going to use a USB flash drive. And this is the drive. It's already attached and it detected it. So we'll click next. And so now it's just going to download everything that it needs to be able to write this USB. So depending on your internet connection and the speed of your USB flash media, these are the things that are going to determine how long it takes for this media to create. But it's pretty straightforward. Once you've launched the app and you plug in your USB, it's all automatic from there. And so it's just about done here, and it's done. And so we're ready to use it. Our Legion Go, or any device for that matter, is in the power down state. And so what I want to do is remove my SteamOS recovery media from my dock. So I just unplugged it. And I'm going to plug in my Windows installation media. And so again, this is not the Legion, the Lenovo Windows installer. This is the Windows that you download from Microsoft's website. And it's important you do not use the Lenovo recovery media, because it's going to completely erase everything. And so now we have our Windows installation, USB installation media hooked up. We're going to hold volume up, tap the power button, and leave your finger on volume up. And we're greeted with the BIOS/bootloader menu. So we're going to click BIOS setup. And we're looking for this EFI USB device. We want to push it up to the top of the list, just like we did with the SteamOS installer. Now we're going to click exit, and then save and exit. And so now it's going to start booting into Windows. And this will take a little while. Just be patient. So if you remember, the Legion Go is a device that's actually in portrait mode because it was a tablet. Originally, this screen was used for a tablet. And so Lenovo repurposed it for the invention of the Legion Go. And so I'm going to rotate it like this just for the installer. But we can go back to landscape mode once we're done with this. But this will make it easier for folks to follow along at home, seeing it rotated in the correct orientation. And so first things first, my locale is the United States. So we'll use that, and we want the install Windows 11 option. And I agree, it's actually not going to delete everything because we're going to tell Windows very specifically where to install Windows. And so we need to go through this. Alright, so this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. Look at this. Disk 1 is our USB media. So you can see we have a way to know where we're at. Our SteamOS home directory is this 2.5 terabyte that's of unknown type. And the one that follows it right after is this 1.1 terabyte. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on that one, and I'm going to click delete partition, and now it refreshed. And so we have 1.1 terabytes of unallocated space, and that remaining unallocated space at the end now went into this total pool of unallocated space. I have disk 0 unallocated space selected, and I'm clicking this create new partition, and it's asking me the size. I'm going to go ahead and go with apply because that's going to use all the available space. And so it's creating the partition right now. Alright, there we go. We want to select it again. So it's partition 10, and see how it created a new partition. So we're going to select partition 10 and then click next. Alright, and so we're going to click install, and now it's running. It got smeared all the way to the top of the screen. Alright, we might be able to rotate the display now. Nope, still not yet. Okay. So I'm just moving it up a little bit so we can still see what's going on. So I'm just going through and setting up Windows like usual. So this would be similar to the state that your Legion Go or handheld device was in when you got it for the first time, if it didn't come with SteamOS already. Just going to check for updates. So in my case, I'm hooked up via wired Ethernet through my cable here, so I might not need to set up my Wi-Fi. Alright, so we get to name our device. Alright, so we're connected to a network. Now for folks that don't have wired internet coming in their dock, I'll provide a link in the description of the video that gives you a link to the driver for your Wi-Fi. I don't want to send the additional diagnostic data. Everything else I'm okay with. Different people have different things they're comfortable with there. So I don't want to restore. I'm selecting the setup as new PC. By the time we log into the desktop environment, we will be able to rotate the display back to landscape mode. So I don't care for any of these things. I'm going to skip. Nope. I don't want to connect my phone. I don't want to back up photos. This one's fine. I'm declining Microsoft Office. Alright, so we're in, and now that we're in, I want to be able to rotate the display. So auto rotation lock is disabled right now, so that means I can just take the console and flip it like this, and it should rotate my display. And the next thing I want to do is actually turn on my rotation lock. There we go. So now we're in Windows. We've got Windows 11 installed. Now it's time to go on to step 4, which is download and install the Legion Space app from Lenovo's website, and go ahead and install your Windows 11 updates. Alright, so we're in Windows and we haven't done anything yet. The installation completed successfully, so this looks good. So I just want to set up a couple usability options real quick to make it easier for me to use this for the rest of this tutorial. So I like single click, and I like to show the full path in the menu bar, and I don't want it to hide known extensions, and I don't want to use file sharing wizard. So one thing I want to show you is now we see the EFI partitions that SteamOS has. They show up here. Do not mess with them. It's kind of annoying, but they're going to show up here basically because it's a file system that Windows understands. And I'm going to go ahead and eject my USB installer media so we can remove our Windows install media. So the first thing we're going to want to do is actually install Legion Space. So we're going to just search for Legion Space. And so it's the first thing that shows up in the Bing search. And we want to grab this exe file right here. Click download. Here you're going to have to add your device's serial number. And you can find the serial number on the back of your Legion Go. Lift this stand back plate up. You can then find your serial number. Alright, so we've got Legion Space downloaded. We entered our serial number on the Lenovo support page and we were able to download it. And so we're going to just open this and go ahead and install it. And once we have Legion Space installed, we can actually use it to download all of our drivers. And once that's done, we're going to want to apply our Windows updates. Alright, that took a little while, but it's done. Let's go ahead and install our Windows updates. So we're going to go ahead and install all these Windows updates. It's going to download various drivers. Alright, so it finished, and now we can restart. We've got Legion Space installed, we've installed our Windows 11 updates, so it's time to move on to step 5, which is go ahead and reboot your Legion Go, and make sure that Legion Space pops up when you log it back in. Now at this point, your SteamOS is no longer bootable. That's because Windows 11 has corrupted the partition table, and it's overwritten the EFI bootloader that SteamOS needs to be able to boot. Don't worry, we're going to fix that later. Let's finish setting up Windows right now. And so make sure that Legion Space pops up, and when it does, go ahead and download and install all your latest drivers. Once that's done, we can go ahead and shut down our device. I mentioned this earlier, if for whatever reason Legion Space doesn't automatically pop up when you log in after you've rebooted your device, don't panic. Reboot again. I've had this happen a couple times where on the second reboot it finally loaded up. The other thing I want to call out here is if for whatever reason Legion Space hangs during a driver installation. I had this happen on one of the few times I tried it on the Legion Go, the OG Legion Go. wait a little while. If it continues to hang, just go ahead and exit the process, reboot your device, and then check for drivers again. Eventually it'll get everything it needs and it'll work. Notice it's booting straight into Windows. That's because once we installed Windows, it corrupted the SteamOS bootloader. So we'll have to fix that once we're done setting up our Windows install. Alright, so we're back. So we're going to click install now. Alright, let's go ahead and adjust some settings. I don't want it automatically going into Legion space. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is go into settings and then go into disks and drives and then check for updates. This is going to check for all the driver updates. Alright, so we have an AMD chipset driver update and the graphics driver update. So we go ahead and install that one. It's saying you want to make sure you're connected to power, which we are. While that's installing, I'm going to go ahead and click download on the graphics driver update. That one takes a while. Alright, so it finished downloading and now we can start installing it. And it just wants us to make sure we're connected to a power supply. And so this takes a while. Try not to let your Legion go fall asleep or go into some like hibernate mode, because I've had problems with this in the past where if the screen goes dim, it will not finish the installation and do some wonky things. So just kind of periodically tap the screen or move your mouse or something to make sure it doesn't go to sleep, because this takes forever. Here we go again with the rotated screen. Oh, no, we're good. Okay, so it's done. So we are all set with our downloaded drivers. We're going to wait. Of course, Legion Space wants to hang. So the driver finished installing. Everything's up to date on our Legion Go. And so I'm going to go ahead and exit out of Legion space. And we should just see everything, the lay of the land here. We've got a 1.14 terabyte C drive that matches our expectation here. Ignore these EFI drives. There should be a way to hide them. Alright, so we've got Windows perfectly configured. Everything's running optimal. It's time to move on to step 6, which is fixing the corrupted partition table and reinstalling SteamOS's EFI bootloader. Now for this step, there's a lot of commands that you have to type and it's complicated. There are many places where you can make mistakes. So in order to reduce the margin of error here, a simple cheat sheet text file that I've got uploaded on our GitHub page, and I'm going to show you how you can download that text file from the console once you're in the recovery environment. And I recommend you copy and pasting the commands in the order as we're talking through them in the video here. That way that you don't make a mistake. Because if you make a mistake, it could render your device no longer bootable again. So really take your time, look at the steps, and yeah, I have it there. So that was another labor of love here. I didn't have to make a cheat sheet for me. I know what I'm doing here. I did this to help everyone else out. So now at this point, we've got SteamOS installed, but it can't boot. We've got Windows 11 installed. It can boot. And so the next thing we're going to want to do is boot off of our SteamOS recovery media. And so we're just going to go ahead and shut down here. Alright, so at this point we've got SteamOS installed, but it's not bootable. And we've got Windows 11 installed, updated, all the drivers, Legion Space is updated, it boots. Coming through this one cable, I've got it hooked up to my dock, and it's providing power to my Legion Go. And now I have my SteamOS recovery media hooked up to my dock, and I want to boot into the BIOS and select the SteamOS recovery media. So I'm holding volume up, tapping the power button, and leaving my finger on the volume up button. Alright, here we are. And now we're going to go into BIOS setup, and we're looking for this EFI USB device. And I'm going to push it up to the top of our menu, and then I'm going to go up here and click exit, and then click save and exit. And now we should start booting into our SteamOS recovery environment. Alright, so we're back in our familiar SteamOS recovery environment. So to make our lives easier here, I created a cheat sheet that we can download and share. It's available on our GitHub page, and I also created a short URL so we can just grab it. And this cheat sheet contains the commands that we're going to need to fix our partition table and reinstall our EFI bootloader. And they're kind of lengthy, and there's a lot of chance to make mistakes when you're typing them. So I put this together for us. So to access it, we're going to go to our system and then console. And let me just make this console bigger so we can see it. And let me clear the screen. Alright, so we're going to type in wget space https://bit.ly/innovision games, one word. And it looks like it's here. It downloaded it. So, yep, that's there. And we're going to open the File Explorer, and we can just double click on this. And so here we have our cheat sheet. And so as we're going through the rest of this tutorial, especially the section for restoring the partition table and the EFI bootloader, we can just copy and paste commands from this text file. So go into System and then Console. And I'm just going to clear the screen here. Let's make this full screen so we can see it better. We're going to type in lsblk, list block devices. And so you'll notice that we don't see the rest of our partitions. We do see our NVMe SSD, and that's because the partition table got corrupted by the Windows installer. And we can see that our SSD is NVMe 0 and 1. So I already have the command buffered here. So I'm just going to paste it, but you're going to want to type in sudo space fdisk space -l space /dev/nvme 0 and 1. And it could be a different device in your system. It's more than likely it's going to be NVMe 0 and 1, but it's possible it could be another device if you've installed to USB media or something of that nature. I will have these commands in the description of the video so you can just copy and paste them. In fact, I have them in this text file here. Don't try to look ahead here just yet. I'm just going to do them one by one. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter here. And so notice this in the red, it's saying that our partition table is basically defective. It got ruined by the Windows installer. And so that's no good. And so that fdisk-l is just going to list information about the disk. So now we actually want to use the fdisk utility to go ahead and make changes to the disk. So it's sudo fdisk/dev/nvme 0 and 1, or whatever your device name is. We're going to hit enter, and it's saying our partition table is dirty. That's not a surprise because we just saw it with our verbose command. And so what we're going to do is type in W and hit enter. Alright, and so now if we run the -l version of the fdisk command, we'll see everything looks clean. So this is great. This is the state we want it to be in. So we're just going to type clear here. And so now what we need to do is reinstall our EFI bootloader. And so I'm just grabbing my command here. Again, these will be in the description of the video. Sudo space EFI boot manager, but its manager is spelled MGR space -C space -D space /dev /NVMe 0N1 space -P space N1 space -L, and then in quotes SteamOS space -L, and then the path to the EFI file. So again, I'm going to have this in the description of the video. You should be able to just copy and paste it right here. And alright, so we rewrote our EFI bootloader, and so now we're going to want to go ahead and shut down here. And we're going to go into Windows, and we're going to run this command from an administrator command prompt. So I'm just going to close out all this. We're almost done, folks. And I'm going to select the shutdown option. Shutdown. Alright, I'm going to disconnect my SteamOS recovery media from my dock. There it is. So now we have the ability to boot into SteamOS and Windows using your BIOS bootloader option menu. Now we're ready to move on to step 7. This is an optional step, but I recommend doing it. These are quality of life improvements. In step 7, we're going to show you how to install a top-level EFI bootloader. And so this gives you a graphical user interface that shows an icon for each of your operating systems, and you can pick which one you want to boot without having to go into the BIOS each time. I personally like to use that, and I'll show you how to configure it with like a timeout. You know, if you didn't make a selection in a certain amount of time, it'll automatically boot something. But I'm also going to show you how to enable mouse support. We're also going to show you how to hide your EFI partitions in Windows 11, so there's no chance that you'd accidentally use them and cause damage to your ability to boot your system. Alright, so our device is shut down, and we're going to hold the volume plus button and tap the power button. Leave your finger on volume plus. Alright, we're going to go into BIOS setup, and we want to move Windows Boot Manager to the top, and then hit exit. And so at this point you could technically be done. You have the ability to boot Windows, you have the ability to boot SteamOS. And so I've got my document pulled up. I want to copy and paste this into an administrator command line or command prompt. So I'm going to type in CMD, and I'm going to right click on this and go to run as administrator, and then select yes. And now we want to paste it. Now I already copied this from here. You will be copying it from the description of the video, and just paste it in there. And basically this is just telling Windows how it's going to use the EFI boot manager. We're going to hit enter. The operation was successful. We're done. And so now we can close out of this. So we don't want to see our SteamOS EFI partitions here in Windows, because we don't want to accidentally have Windows delete something from them or add something to them. So we're going to show you how to hide them and remove them so they don't show up here anymore. First thing you want to do is go into the search and type in computer management. And once it opens up here, we're going to go to the left hand side, and there's this option, disk management. And so you can barely see it here, but this is the EFI partition D. You can see it there. So you can either right click on this one or this one. I'm just going to click on the one down here, right click on it, and we're going to say change drive letter and paths. And we're going to click remove. And it's going to give us a warning saying some programs might not function correctly. Well, no programs should be using it at this point. And what we're trying to do is avoid having programs use it. So let's go ahead and click yes here. And then we're going to do the same with the one labeled E. And again, you'll see EFI got selected, EFIE got selected here. So we're going to right click on it and go to change drive letter and paths. Be careful you do not click format. Again, we're going to click remove, and it's going to give us the warning. But again, we're not actually using this drive for anything, and we don't want it to start to get used. So let's go ahead and click yes. And now it will be gone. And look, it doesn't show up anymore when we open this PC. And that's that. And now we want to boot back into SteamOS. So I'm going to power down my Legion Go by selecting shutdown. Alright, now we want to boot back into SteamOS. So, you guessed it, we're going to hold volume plus, tap the power button, leave your finger on volume plus. Alright. And now we're going to go into BIOS setup, and we're going to move SteamOS to the top of the list. And then we're going to tap exit, and then save and exit. And for most people, you might just be happy going through the BIOS to pick which one you want to boot. But I just want a top level interface. So I'm going to go into desktop environment, switch to desktop. The next thing I'm going to want to do is open up Firefox. So I'm on this GitHub project called Steam Deck Refind, or Refind. They have a really handy graphical user interface for getting this installed here. What I want to do is take this command line from them. We're going to copy it, and we're going to open our console. So we're going to go into System and then Console. I will have a link to this GitHub repository in the description of the video, but I'm just pasting their command for cloning their repository. Okay, so it's asking for our password. So it installed Refind, or Bootloader Manager. So now we have the GUI downloaded in our Steam Deck users home directory. So if we go into home, and then in this Steam Deck Refind, and now we're going to double click this executable, go to execute, continue. And so this is really cool right here. So we could pick our default boot option is going to be SteamOS, and boot option 1. So you can make this Windows or SteamOS. We're going to pick SteamOS. We're going to have boot option 1 be SteamOS. Boot option 2 be Windows. I'm not going to use any other boot options. I want my timeout to be 10 seconds. You can actually tap on the screen at any point in time and change it. So one other thing that's noteworthy, I want to enable mouse support in there. So I click that. And then instead of Nobara, I want to use Arch Linux. Now what we're going to do is click install Refind. It's going to ask for our password. So it's downloading the EFI bootloader. It's installed it. And then I want to create my config. And so all the parameters that we just set are going to go into this config once we create config. One thing I also want to note is a handy option for some people might be boot into the last OS that was used. That's actually how I like to use it, but I'm finding myself going more and more every day into SteamOS, so I'm going to have that be the default. And so I'm going to create my config now. So again, we set SteamOS as the first boot option, Windows as the second boot option. We use the firmware's boot enum. We're not going to change that. That's one of the default settings. I set mine to 10 seconds here. You can let the timeout be whatever you want. This is basically how long it's going to wait until it tries to boot the operating system. Really important here is the mouse support. So now I'm going to create this config by clicking create config. It's going to take a little while. Now we're going to go to install config, and it's going to ask for our password. So it downloaded the config and icons for each of the operating systems into our EFI partition. That's done. And so now we can actually close out all this. And we can shut down. If you made it this far, congratulations, give yourself a pat on the back, because you now have the illest upgrade of the century. You now have the ability to dual boot SteamOS and Windows 11 on your gaming devices, and you can live in the best of both worlds. All your games right there on one device, all under one roof. It doesn't get much better than that. Now make sure you like the video, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Hit me up in the comment section, not just asking for help, but let me know the things that you appreciated about the video and the things that you found helpful. This is going to help motivate and shape future discussions in our community. All right, so now we turn it on. And look at that. We have the option to pick SteamOS or Windows. So I'm going to go ahead and boot into Windows. I clicked on that with my mouse, but you can actually tap on it with your finger on the screen. So I'm going to shut down. All right, and we're going to turn it back on. Now if I want to go into SteamOS, I can just tap on the SteamOS icon by double tapping it. And now we're in SteamOS. Stick around so you don't miss all the amazing gaming tips, tricks, and mods we've got coming down the pipeline.